If you didn't already know, there's a pretty big game happening in Chapel Hill this weekend. Duke, North Carolina, round one, Dean Smith Center. It is going to be live, a top 10 matchup between these two ACC foes. And of course, we got a lot to talk about here on the Talking Heels podcast. I'm Nick Delahanty, the guy to the right. That's Jordan Falls. Jordan, what's your feeling going in this week? Big week.
I'm feeling good, especially coming off a loss. I think the guys will be regrouped and focused, and then we got a really good squad that matches up well, somewhat well. We'll go into dive into matchups later, but feeling pretty good. The first one's in Chapel Hill. The first one always seems to have a little bit more energy around it. It's been almost 300 plus days since they've met on the hardwood, and so that first one just feels a little bit more special sometimes, especially, and it's even more special when you get to play in your own building.
Absolutely. And we were joking around before the show. I was saying how I was a little unnerved at the Duke background behind me, and Jordan gets the good side. But hey, it's a fun rivalry, and it'll be exciting in Chapel Hill on Saturday night. But before we get to that, Carolina is coming off their first ACC loss of the season in a rather disappointing loss to Georgia Tech on the road. Tar Heels had a chance to win the game late. RJ Davis gets fouled, but no call. Ends up going against the Tar Heels. It is what it is at that point in regards to the foul on Davis not being called. But if you're looking at it from a grand scheme of things, I think we all knew that Carolina was destined to lose again. It was just a matter of when.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, anybody that thought that this team was going 20-0 in the conference had hit their head on some hardwood or something. I mean, there's no chance that this team was going 20-0. I mean, the best record in the ACC since the 20-game schedule has been 16-4. And this team is still on pace for that, if not better. So you knew they was going to lose. You just didn't know when. And if you had to pick a game to lose in this stretch between the upcoming games and the games before it, that'd probably be the game you choose to. If you could handpick a game, say this is the one I want to lose. I think I will pick Georgia Tech. It's a quad two loss for now. It's the game right before the Duke game, so you get to refocus. Sometimes losses get to refocus you, and then the games after Duke, they're really quality games that Carolina could really pick up some wins to help their seed line in March. So you don't want to necessarily, yeah, Georgia Tech's 10-11. It might look as like a bad loss right now. Georgia Tech wins some games that stays a quality two loss. It's not the end of the world, and get to move on and get ready for Duke on Saturday night.
Yeah, and to add to that, the Tar Heels have struggled in Atlanta. They just have. It's just something that has been an issue for them. And like you said, if you could have picked the game to lose, it probably would have been that one. You know, Damon Stoudemire's team has done a lot better than what their record says. They also beat Duke. They beat Carolina. This is a scrappy team, and on their home floor, they came out with a vengeance. They were ready. You know, Carolina didn't come out ready to play. You could point to a lot of different things in that game. RJ Davis scores 28 points and needs 20 plus shots to do it. They did a really good job of limiting what he was able to do. Elliot Cadeau fouls out. He had 5 fouls in 7 minutes of second half action. And yes, a lot of them were questionable, but they're still fouls. It's still something that is concerning. Harrison Ingram and Cormac Ryan combined to shoot 6 for 28 from the floor. Hubert Davis benches Armando Bacot in what looked like him not being happy with his defensive effort. It was just kind of one of those games where you could label it as a trap game. And yeah, everybody's probably saying these guys are way too okay with the loss. It's not that we're okay with the loss. It's that you can understand it. And you know what? You miss 8 free throws or 9 free throws, whatever it happened to be. And you mean to tell me that you had the chance to win the game with the guy who should be the ACC player of the year with the ball in his hands? You know what? I like my chances. It didn't happen in that one. We've seen Carolina come back in the second half. It just hasn't worked in that one. So again, you're coming off that loss, and the guys are motivated. They had a team meeting when they got back into Chapel Hill. They understand what's at stake. They understand it. It's just a matter of, chalking it up as a loss, and you got to learn from it.
Yeah, I mean, you pointed to the free throws. It was 8 missed free throws, 9 of 17, 53% from the line. In a 1-point loss, that looks bad. But then you point to all the other things that went wrong. I think about the only thing that went right on Tuesday night in Atlanta was out rebounding the Yellow Jackets 48-41. Other than that, it was really bad all around. And you mentioned Atlanta's been a house of horrors, and we use that term in football. It feels like we use that term everywhere because it is. I mean, now I think Carolina's 6-9 in their last 15 games in Atlanta and on the men's basketball side of things. I think the 16-17 team, national championship team, lost to a Georgia Tech team that was awful. I know in believe 08-09 lost to Georgia Tech. There's been some good Carolina teams that cannot win in Atlanta. I don't know what it is. I don't understand why. Even in football, we've had some good football teams that can't win in Atlanta. So, but overall, from the game aspect, we didn't talk about the foul or lack thereof on the last play. But take the ball or take the whistle out of the official's hands on that play, and you do that by not going 36% from the field, by not going 28% from the 3-point line, 53% from free throw line. Carolina did not shoot well Tuesday night, and sometimes you have those types of games. You just cannot buy a basket. And Georgia Tech was able to make one more than Carolina did, and it won the game. I mean, and Georgia Tech didn't play great, 41% from the field. They did make one more 3-pointer than Carolina did on 8 less attempts, but both teams had the same amount of free throws, and Georgia Tech made 6 more in a 1-point game. So everybody wants to point to free throws. Everyone wants to point to the foul or no foul on RJ. And 9 times out of 10, that foul might be called. Usually the home team gets the favor of the whistle, and Georgia Tech did. But don't let it come to that. And it is what it is. It's time to move on. Like you said, they had a nice long team meeting when they got back to Chapel Hill. That kind of scares me a little bit because the last time we had a nice long team meeting following a loss was at Wake Forest last year when they stayed in the locker room for an hour after the game and nothing really changed. So that kind of scares me. Now, this team is different. We all know that, but I feel like we have, as Carolina fans, might have a little bit of PTSD from last year.
Listen, I'm on the complete opposite side of things in terms of that meeting. I just think that was kind of a way for those veterans to be like, hey guys, listen, you know what? It's one of those things where it happens and we're going to get better from it. I think that they're understanding that, you know what? They've won how many games in a row before that, but it hasn't been pretty. There have been moments where it hasn't been pretty. They've had some offensive droughts. They've had some struggles, and certain lineups don't mix and match very well. And I think it was just a way for those guys to be like, hey, listen, you know what? Those kind of things happen. And, you know, I'm not worried about it. I don't think it's something that you have to read into. I just think it's a bunch of guys who are hungry and, you know, want to get better together. Like, we've heard so much about them liking each other and how connected they are. I think that's just their way of connecting. So I think that's a good thing that they were able to hash it out a little bit. Not hash it out, but, you know, talk about it.
Is it concerning that even though they had won 10 straight and had not lost a road game to that point, is it concerning that in these true road games, they are not shooting well? I mean, I think
Oh,
every game they're at what point does the level of concern go from like here to start creeping up the ladder?
the thing that scares me are the offensive droughts. It seems like every game we're getting these big offensive droughts, and it's mind-boggling. It's to the point where you can't take RJ Davis off the court at sometimes. That's how scary it is. And that was the one thing that this team, you know, separated itself from in terms of last year. You didn't have to play ISO ball. And now you see RJ Davis having to play some ISO ball and having to do things by himself. It's something that, you know, that does concern me. I do think that they're going to get more production from Baycott. I do. I think that that's one of the focal points, hopefully, of that meeting is how do we get the ball into the big man who's going to get us open shots. And, you know, early in the year, Baycott was facilitating the ball so well. Seemed like Cormac Ryan had open shots. Harrison Ingram had open shots. It was making life easier. Now, life's a little bit more difficult for RJ Davis with all the attention he's getting. So, you know what? I'm more worried about the offensive droughts. I want to see them kind of shore things up in that regard. But there were two things that were very evident to me from that Georgia Tech game. And I don't want to overreact over one game, but I'm going to say them and I want to hear your thoughts on it. That's why I didn't even bring this up to him in a group chat. So, I was saving this for you guys. Number one, Elliot Cadeau is too valuable to take off the floor.
100%. I mean, we saw it against Florida State. I mean, Carolina didn't turn the ball or had turnover problems in the first half against Florida State. They in the second half they weren't turning the ball over. The coaching staff takes Elliott out of the game for 53 seconds, and Carolina turns the ball over one time, and then he goes right back in, doesn't come out the rest of the game. That's a problem. Against Georgia Tech, they had 10 first half turnovers. They only had one in the second half, and that was with Cadeau fouling out. But Cadeau is so critical to the offense and to taking care of the basketball. It's like if he's not on the floor, there could be some turnover problems. And gotta find a way to fix that because he can't play 40 minutes the rest of the year. You gotta figure out a way to patch those pieces together when either Cadeau isn't on the floor or RJ isn't on the floor. How do we still take care of the basketball? That's a problem.
100%. And that's where I was kind of leaning with that too, is like you feel like the offense is in good hands when Elliott's on the floor, and now he's playing so well in terms of understanding when to slow the pace down, when to push, finding the right guy. Yeah, there's been some turnovers, but he's a freshman. You're gonna understand that. But it's such a difference when he's off the floor because you see RJ Davis having to do a lot more, and he's been logging a lot of minutes. That's scary. They don't have another true ball handler that could take that load off. RJ's better off the ball. And we've
100%.
seen that this year with how Cadeau and him have worked so well. They have such a connection that they've built. Seth Trimble is not a ball handler. You know, you're not looking for him to handle the ball. And that's no disrespect to Seth, but it's just not his game. So they really don't have an option there. But the other thing that I want to kind of hear your thoughts on, it's time to shorten the rotation. And by shorten the rotation, I mean go down to 8 guys. I go
I
Seth Trimble, I go Jalen Washington, and I go Jalen Withers off the bench. And that's as deep as I get on the bench.
I agree with that. Nothing against Paxton Wojcik at all. I feel like he has given Carolina some good minutes here and there, but feels like you're still trying to play too many guys and nobody can get into a rhythm in conference play. And you don't, that might be contributing to some of these long droughts that you're talking about offensively. You can't play a guy 2 minutes here, 2 minutes there. They're not on the floor long enough to get warm and get going and get the feel of the game, the rhythm. I agree with that about eight man rotation right there. I think that's about right with Withers and Trimble. Trimble obviously being your main on ball defender for whoever the opposing player's best guard is, and then Withers being somebody you can sub in for Ingram or Cormac as a energy athletic boost guy, and then obviously Washington in place of Baycott when he needs a breather or whatnot. We saw uh, Hubert go to that two big man look a little way back about a month ago, but we haven't seen it since. I don't think you'll see it again. I think whether Washington Baycott will be a true switch, and it'll be Baycott playing 30 minutes and Washington playing around 10.
I could definitely see that Baycott Washington factor going into the Duke game, especially if they have a little bit of foul trouble. You know, Jalen Withers probably will get some time guarding Filipowski, but who's to say that if Duke counters with Ryan Young and Filipowski, that they don't go and counter with Washington and Baycott and kind of take that attention off of Armando a little bit and let him go against Ryan Young, try to get him in foul trouble. Baycott said it before in his press conference how he thought Derek Lively guarded him extremely well, probably the best he's seen in his career. But can Filipowski guard him to that level and stay out of foul trouble? We've seen him get in foul trouble, and same with Ryan Young. So nothing against Paxton Wojcik. Trust me, I'm not. I love the kid. I think he's a great asset in terms of leadership. But it feels like back in the day when Carolina brought in 2 lower level transfers in Justin Pierce and Christian Keeling, and nothing against those guys, but again, they weren't as effective as they were at the lower Division I level. And you know what? It just seems like he's struggling. And like you said, you can't just plug and match in 2 minute spurts. And notice when they do go to those lineups, that's when the leads start to dwindle. And it's not just Paxton, it's the whole entire concept of it.
Yeah, 100%. I think you hit the nail on the head. I think Paxton's about where the lineup stops. And Zayden has shown he still needs a little bit more development. He has a high motor, can get in some rebounds, but now you're starting to get these a little bit more tougher conference games. James Okonkwo, Zayden High, those would be guys that you try to develop, use in case of foul trouble or anything like that. But you're not going to see those guys deep in the rotation, or we hope not to see those guys, I guess, in that deep in the rotation. That's where you're talking about those offensive droughts going forward. I agree with you a little bit on do we see Baycott and Jalen Washington on Saturday night? Maybe one on Filipkowski, one on Mitchell if they're playing together.
Yeah, it could
Maybe
be that too. Yeah.
go a little bit bigger and move Ingram up, and then Ingram can guard somebody like Proctor, and then you only have Roach and McCain to worry about with their starting five for the most part. So, or like you said, Ryan Young as well. But it'll be interesting to see the lineup for Saturday night. I'm interested to see the. I'm assuming Baycott is going to guard Filipkowski and vice versa. I imagine that'll be. I mean, unless Mitchell guards Baycott on the other end, but that'll be interesting to see what Shire does on that side.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see. And just to get back to Zayden High a minute, I have nothing against Zayden. I didn't even mention him before, but the problem with how they're using Zayden High right now is that he's sitting on the bench for 18 to 19 minutes in the first half. And at that point, I don't care who you are. It is very difficult to stay locked in, engaged, and be ready to go. And they're pulling him in, and it just seems like there's nothing going the poor kid's way. Like, if you're going to play him, you got to play him some more minutes. You got to let him get a feel of the game. And that should have came in non-conference play. That should not be at this point of the year. So, again, he's a guy that I think has a high upside. I think he could be a really good player at Carolina. But pick and choose where you use him, especially now, because you don't want to kill his confidence, especially coming in, to a high-level setting like this. But let's go into the Duke game. And you brought up the lineup a little bit. There's a lot of concern with Duke right now. Jeremy Roach has been dealing with an injury that he re-aggravated, and he's missed some time. Knowing Jeremy Roach, he's probably going to start in this game. He's built for this. And, you got to give him credit for where credit's due. Now, if he does start the game, who goes to the bench? Do you move Proctor, who's been playing pretty well? Do you move Caleb Foster, who's been arguably their best scorer? Like, there's a lot of different things that Shire could look and try to do here.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a situation we don't really know. We're guessing. Obviously, we're not on that side of things, but I mean, Roach is playing. I think any Carolina fan knows Roach is playing. He didn't start their last game at Virginia Tech. He played limited minutes, only 15 minutes, but he was, 5'11" for I'm sorry. He played 29 minutes off the bench. I was looking at the wrong stat line there, but he did come off the bench. Like you said, do you take Foster out? I imagine that's what they do. If I was guessing, you start Roach. The question even on both sides is, okay, who guards who? Does Carolina put RJ on Roach?
That's what I would do. I honestly would probably go RJ on Roach. I would go Cadeau on McCain. Even though that matchup does scare me, I'll get to that in a minute. We'll go on that. And if, say, Proctor starts, I guess you put Cormac on Proctor. I kind of like that matchup.
You have to.
I feel like Cormac will just irritate Proctor. I feel like he'll rattle him just because he'll tick him off a little bit. And I love Proctor. I think his game is phenomenal. But I do think that you could irritate him a little bit. And I could see Harrison guarding Filipowski. I really can.
Really?
Yeah, because think about this, right? If you're John Shire and you go, I'm telling you, he's going to start Ryan Young in this game. He's going to start Ryan Young, and he's going to have Ryan Young try to beat up Baycott a little bit because he doesn't want Filipowski getting into foul trouble. So he'll bring Mitchell and Foster off the bench to try to give an advantage off the bench, because what happens if Baycott gets in trouble? Then you go to Washington, smaller matchup, Mitchell against Washington, and then you're really starting to mix and match here. I could see Ryan Young getting the start in this game. I don't know why, but I feel like Shire's going to be like, you know what? We're going to roll the dice here. I feel like he's going to do it.
Ryan Young's only started 11 games out of 56 at Duke, right?
Correct. I know that. But Shire does like to mix and match. He is not going to just sit there and be like, I have my starting five. He is going to find a way to manipulate. He could start Mitchell. He really could. Mitchell's a very good basketball player.
That's who I think starts. I think it's gonna be Mitchell and Filipkowski down low, which is why you said that Ingram's on Filipkowski is kind of Filipkowski's their biggest guy on their team.
Well, if Mitchell starts, then I think you have to put Baycott on Filipowski, and I don't love that. I really
I don't.
don't.
I don't like. I think I'd rather have. I think I'd rather have it the way you said it. Ingram on Filipowski because Filipowski can step out a little bit more. Still really scary. That's so like a
It's a match.
3-inch.
Listen,
It's a bad matchup.
Carolina has a very bad matchup down low in this game because yes, Armando's Armando. He's gonna get his rebounds, but Duke has size to match that. And then Carolina's rest of their lineup, it's not big as it usually is. Ingram's a very small player to play the 4. It's not like he's a guy that's gonna wow you with size. He's a typical 3 if you look at it that way.
Right. So from the Duke side of things, the key to the game is win the game down low. So how is
I think if Duke could get Armando into foul trouble early, they have a very big advantage in this game. And that's keeping Filipowski on the floor. Because
right.
when they go to those 2 big sets, Carolina is going to have to go to Jalen Withers and they're going to have to go to Jalen Washington. They're just going to have to do that. And for them, they go with Filipowski. That's their guy. And they go with Filipowski and they go with Roach. And if one of those 2 guys gets going, it's tough. It's a tough matchup. So I think if you're Carolina, you want to take Filipowski out of the game and you want to say, you know what, let's make this a one-on-one game, RJ versus Roach, and see how it goes.
You'd get into a size mismatch a little bit, maybe, but what if you put Cormac on Roach for defense and move RJ to Proctor?
I don't like that.
But you're shutting down Roach.
Not necessarily. That's the thing.
That's the gamble.
That's the gamble. To be completely honest with you, if Cormac's shot's not falling, I'm throwing Seth Trimble in there and letting him go up to the hot hand.
That was the next one.
If Cormac's not shooting the ball well within the first 5 minutes of the game, I think it's useless to keep trying to put a square peg in a round hole. I think you go to Seth Trimble and you see if you could get a spark out of him and go from there and just throw different bodies. I think they're going to mix and match.
I think that's the key right there. And I think it's going to be on both sides. And we've seen Hubert do this a lot. You was talking about Shire mix and match the starting lineup. Hubert's not done it in the last 14-ish games since that when was the first game of the starting 5? The Florida State game?
Yeah, I think so.
So the starting lineup's not changed since December 2nd, but Hubert has always talked about that NBA style lineup situation where, hey, we're gonna start this guy depending on who the other team starts. And you might see a lot of that. It's gonna be a fun game Saturday night. I'm really looking forward to it. We've not had a game of this magnitude in this rivalry as far as preseason or pregame hype in quite some time, other than the 22-23 Final Four, and then obviously K's last year and K's last game. But even then, like K's last game, like we were like a 13-point dog. Like nobody gave Carolina a chance in that game. And they had all those alumni back. So even the preseason or pregame hype there was all about the ceremony. It wasn't even about the outcome of the result on the floor. So, I mean, you have to go back to 2019 to the last time these 2 teams met ranked, much less in the top 10. And so, and that was the Zion year, and he only played 1 game that year. So, so much hype around this game. And even then, it's more about the pregame hype than it is the actual game because all those games since then have still delivered. Even when Carolina wasn't ranked or Carolina was bad, had the game that Carolina had won in overtime and then the missed free throw, put back, all that nonsense. So,
when are you going to bring up bad memories?
I know. I'm just saying Carolina has been in games when they weren't good. This one is where they're both actually playing at a high level. Duke has found their stride lately after some early season losses, including a loss at Georgia Tech. So, I think Duke is probably thinking they're a little worried getting Carolina coming off a loss. I think that's the worst case scenario for Duke is that they're getting Carolina coming off that loss to Georgia Tech in a game that Carolina didn't play well and still had a chance to win the game.
Absolutely. Now, let me pose this question to you. Do you consider starting Jalen Withers to match up with size?
No chance.
You stay with status quo?
Yeah, stay with stat. The only, unless you're saying bring Withers in for Cormac, that'd be the only change, I guess, because Ingram's got to stay on the floor.
Well, yeah, Ingram. I think that if you're looking at it from that perspective, you're either taking out Cadeau or you're taking out Ryan, and I think that taking out Cadeau is a little more of
You
a
can't do that.
challenge,
You can't
and
do
I
that.
really wouldn't do that. So it would have to be Cormac, but I would stick with the same five because obviously it doesn't really matter who starts the game. It matters, how the game goes and how you can make things happen in terms of that. But it's something to think about. And you mentioned it with talking about Hubert Davis saying, I'm not stuck on starting lineup. He's willing to mix and match if needed, and if he's gonna do it, it would be in this game.
100%. I think it's gonna. This game is always the game that's every second is analyzed essentially, especially from a fan standpoint, and I think it's gonna. We've talked about it before. We talked about back before Christmas break, and it was like win the 4-minute games and just win those games. And I think that's what this game is gonna be. And I think the matchups are gonna be that way. I think you're gonna see the same starting five for Carolina at least. We don't know what Shire will do on their side, but I think you see the same starting five for Carolina and see how the first 4 minutes go. And Baycott picks up 2 early fouls in the first 4 minutes. He's sitting the rest of the half, which will not be good for Carolina. You hit the nail on the head there. That is advantage Duke big time, and worst case for Carolina. And then I think you'll see how those first 4 minutes are going, and then see Hubert start to make some changes and maybe bring in Withers, maybe bring in Trimble. The concern we've talked about Elliott Cadeau's foul trouble that concerns me. Shire, everybody knows about it at this point. We know about it. The Duke coaching staff knows about it. Are they giving the ball, assuming he guards McCain, are they giving the ball to McCain and saying, go at Cadeau? Because that's a lead to lead to turnovers or has recently.
One thing that I know about McCain's game is that for a freshman, he's very poised. And you got to give him the credit. Not many freshmen come in and are that poised for a big time program. For him, I think he can make smart plays that he can draw fouls. We see it all the time. Yeah, he's a guy that, when you're guarding, first of all, he's bigger than Cadeau in terms of size. So it's a little bit, not much, but a little bit.
It's not much.
And yeah, not terribly much, but it's still a little bit different. And he's the guy that will slow the game down, but then he'll speed it back up. So I think it's a kind of a matchup for Cadeau. Like, okay, this guy's kind of like me. And I think both of them have red flags going into this matchup if they do match up against each other, because I think that they both control each other foul trouble. It depends on which one happens first.
Yeah, and you hope that it's not on Cadeau's side.
Well, yes, that is true. And you hope that Cadeau could drive to the hoop and get Filipowski in foul trouble. That's the key.
Can Cadeau drive to the hoop on Duke? He's been
They
doing it
have
against everybody else.
One of those guards. Not one of those guards could keep up with his speed. If he wants to go to the hoop, he'll get to the hoop. It's just a matter of if he can finish.
We've said all year, we've said it for the last month at least, is that when Cadeau wants to go to the rim, he can get to the rim. And so can he get to the rim? And if he can get there, and you just mentioned it, if he can get there and draw contact on Filipowski and get the whistle, that could benefit the Heels. I mean, we just talked about if too quick get caught on Baycott, well, flip it around. If you take Filipowski out of the game, I mean, that could be important. So, all right, Duke, Carolina, remember Paulo Bencaro, Carolina went into the mindset of he can score, but nobody else can beat us.
Yeah.
Is that the mindset you're taking in here? And if you had to choose one between Filipowski and Roach, which one are you picking?
That's tough. Well, Boncaro was a guy on that team. They really, not that they didn't have talent around him, because obviously they were very good, but I feel like he was just that guy. Like, if he scores, he's not killing us from three. He's driving to the hoop. I would rather give the 2 than the 3. But the issue is if Filipowski gets going from deep, that's a little bit of a concern. And in this game, knowing what we know about Roach and how he's not 100%, or at least we think he's not 100%, I would try to make him beat you. I
Let
would
Roach beat you.
I would shut down Filipowski any chance I got, and I would say, look, Proctor beat me, Jared McCain beat me, Jeremy Roach beat me. You guys beat me, you win the game. Good for you. But I think Filipowski's got to be the guy you got to lock in on.
And you're gonna do that with Ingram and Baycott and Washington, I guess. Is gonna be
Withers.
Withers. Just throw them all at him.
You know what? If it gets to that point, I'm throwing James Okonkwo in there and I'm letting him beat him up a little bit.
We've seen teams double Baycott, and I expect Duke to do the same thing Saturday night with Mitchell and Filipkowski. I still expect, even though he's not been playing well offensively, even though he's not been scoring, I still expect Baycott to get double team attention. Otherwise, he could have a big night and beat you. Do you expect Carolina to do the same thing in double? And Hubert is not a believer in doubling. They found that out at Clemson. Hubert don't believe in doubling when they face PJ Hall and Shefflin. So does it get to the point that you double Filipkowski?
Before I get to that point, and I'll answer your question because it's a very good one. I just want to make a note because, the ACC coaches and the coaches around the country understand how good Armando Bacot is. And even when Armando Bacot's not scoring at the high level that he is known to score at, he is still a very viable threat. And he's a guy that you want to slow down. So you know that John Shire's going into this game and he's saying, do not let 5 get going. Because if 5 gets going, 4 gets going. And if 4 gets going, we're in trouble. So they're basically going to double Armando. They're going to force others to beat him. And those others are Cormac Ryan, Harrison Ingram, Seth Trimble. Those guys are going to have to do the job. So, yes, the experts on X will tell you how bad Armando Bacot is, but he is the focal point of every game plan against every team they play. But to answer your question, yes, I would consider doubling, but I wouldn't leave certain guys open. McCain's gotten hot. I don't know if I want to take my chance with him in that game, shooting wide open threes. Caleb Foster's another one. The guy, when he gets going, he's tough to slow down. So I would consider it. I mean, if Filipowski starts cooking, you got to do something. But again, it all depends on matchups too, because, if you have a guy like Jalen Withers on him at one point and he's a bigger body, you might be able to get away with going man and just letting him go one-on-one in ISO situations.
Yeah, the 3 you don't want you might want a double. I don't know that I would early. It depends on how those first 4 to 8 minutes go, but you open up a good point. Don't leave 3-point shooters, specific ones like McCain, open. And we talked about it last week and how good Carolina's 3-point defense has been. But the last 2 games, their opponents are 18 of 40 and shooting 45% from the field. Florida State and Georgia Tech both were 9 of 20. So they were, I think, if you before these past 2 games, and if you took away the first Florida State game, they allowed ACC opponents to shoot 18%. And now the last 2 games are at 45%. So those are 2. That's a big stat, and they're not under Coach K anymore. But Duke has always been really good at shooting a 3, and always seems to beat us by shooting a 3. It's definitely not a ledge I would want to live on if it comes down to leaving somebody open from beyond the arc, because those can be momentum changers, and you'd much rather them beat you inside with 2 and then hope RJ can go down hit a 3 or get the 2 back, or somebody, And I think it's will come down to, I think Cormac and Harrison, you hit those 2 pretty spot on with if Baycott gets going, or hey, somebody else besides Baycott's gonna beat us. They're going to key in on RJ. They're going to key in on Baycott. Hey, Harrison and Cormac ain't been playing well. Everybody knows Cormac can shoot. He's streaky, but he can shoot. So they're going to still be aware of him, but they're not going to be keying on him. And he's got to hit open shots. That's what it comes down to. And they missed quite a few in Atlanta. But hopefully being the friendly confines of the Smith Center and home game with the home crowd, they can start to make some.
Absolutely. Now, before we kind of give our predictions on the game and kind of wrap things up, key to the game for both sides. What's the key to victory for Duke?
I think it's going to be, we've talked about all show, I think it's going to be Filipkowski. I think Filipkowski getting going, using his, depending on who the matchup is, if it's Baycott guarding Filipkowski, I think it's going to be Filipkowski stepping out, making Baycott guard the perimeter. It's not his strongest suit. Baycott is good at a lot of things. It's not that. And I'm going to throw another one there. Duke does a lot of ball screen and motion with the ball on offense, and Georgia Tech gave Carolina problems with ball screen, including the last possession of the game that Georgia Tech made the runner over Baycott. That is going to be interesting how Carolina handles the ball screen, whether they switch, go under, go over. Carolina was switching a lot early on. It wasn't going well. They switched in Atlanta on that last possession. It didn't go well. I feel like it's going to be on-ball defense and things like that for the Carolina side of things. From Duke, taking advantage of that, running a lot of ball screens, getting Roach and Filipkowski, like you see with Baycott and RJ running those high ball screens. I think you'll see a lot of that between a multitude of guys, between Roach and Proctor, working with Filipkowski and Mitchell, just to make Carolina's bigs work and then try to draw some fouls. But that's in my opinion, Filipkowski getting going early is the key for Duke to win this game.
Yeah, I agree with you there. And if I'm Duke, I'm looking at the last 2 games that Carolina played. I'm saying, hey, we can make some threes over these guys. And they haven't been as good as they were early on in the year. And you know what? If we hit a couple early, we get on a streak, we might get some momentum. So I'm thinking Filipowski early, get him going, opens up the lanes for the shooters. Now, the same might be said for Carolina here. What's your key to victory for Hubert Davis's team in this one?
I want to say getting out and running some more and getting the transition. We can all point to RJ Davis. I mean, he's been the key all year. But I think it's maybe a little bit of RJ early and then a lot of everybody else later on once they key in on RJ. And I think it comes down to making shots. I mean, that's what they haven't done against Georgia Tech. That's what they've struggled to do on the road. They've not struggled as much at home. I think taking care of the ball, not turn the ball over. We've seen 2 halves lately where they turn the ball over a lot. Duke only averages around a little under 7 steals a game. So don't have unforced turnovers either. Don't lose the ball off your knee out of bounds. Don't fumble it off when you're battling 2 guys for the rebound. It's your own teammate.
Make your layups.
So make your layups. I mean, in Tallahassee, Carolina had a 11-point lead and missed back-to-back layups to go up 15. I mean, if you're in a situation like that Saturday night where you're up double digits early, don't let up. And Carolina's up in double digits in Atlanta and went on that scoring drought. So I think for Carolina, it's going to be a little of RJ early, a lot of everybody else there in the middle, and then more of RJ late to close it out. But I wouldn't mind seeing Carolina try to speed Duke up either, like throw that full court press at them after made baskets. They did against Florida State early in the year, and it helped them get back in the game. And they did against Connecticut and gave the Huskies problems. And they did against Georgia Tech to erase an 8-point deficit in 2 minutes late Tuesday night. So when the Carolina throws that full court press, they gave opponents problems. It's just doing it at the right time. And I'd like to see that a little bit Saturday night in Chapel Hill from Hubert.
I think if Carolina can make this a track meet, this game heavily favors them. And the reason being is when you're playing against a team with size and you're playing against a team that's athletic, when you speed the game up, you put the pressure on them. And if you can go up and down the court and you can make baskets, Cadeau at the rim, Cadeau passes out to Ingram for a 3, Davis gets going. It makes things a lot more difficult. And like you said, on the defensive end, I think they just have to lock in a little bit defensively. But I would like to see them speed it up. I think early on you might see a track meet. They're going to try to run. And I think Hubert Davis has to be upset with how they didn't really run very well against Georgia Tech. You could say the same against Florida State. It wasn't their best kind of pace. But I think that's where you got to look at. I think you got to look at getting to Carolina basketball, going quick down the court, getting your shots, taking advantage of your mismatches. And then when the game does slow down, that's when you have to turn to number 5 and let number 5 go to work and getting him opportunities at the rim, using him in pick and rolls, making life a little bit easier for Armando Baycott instead of making it so difficult where he's backing in from 15 feet out. And, that's not what you want from Armando Baycott. If you're Duke, yeah, he can make that shot, but you're taking that opportunity every chance you get because that's making him work. So I think there's a lot of keys to it, but I think that running is going to be the main one for Carolina, and running successfully, not just running and, like you said, throwing the ball out of bounds and making careless turnovers. Now, what is your prediction for this big game?
Oh boy. Oh boy.
You knew this was coming.
I know. I think Carolina. I do think Carolina wins. They got swept last year. The core of this team was on that team last year. Both games were almost identical. The way that almost the entire 40 minutes of both games was almost identical. All score and everything. The way it played out, not finishing down the stretch. Bacon and RJ were, and Trimble and Washington were all on that team. I do think Carolina wins, especially in Chapel Hill. I think it's going to be a great atmosphere. Game day's there. We know it's a sellout, obviously. Ticket prices are sky high. You need to rob a bank to afford to go. I think Carolina wins, and I do think it's going to be close. I don't expect Duke to come in and roll over. And Duke has had their problems, but unless there's something with Roach that we don't know about, and Roach don't play the his full allotment of 31 minutes a game, I think it's close. I'm gonna go 83-79 Heels in a track meet.
In a track meet. So I was torn on this, obviously, because I do think that both teams are playing very good basketball, and you got to look at it from the grand scheme of things. And Hubert Davis made a great comment before in his press conference about game day being on campus. And he said, it doesn't matter to us that they're there. What matters is that game day is not going to help us box out, and it's not going to help us slow down Filipowski. And I thought that was a great comment from Hubert. And, you know, you got to see his funny side of things. But given that this game is in Chapel Hill, I do think Carolina is going to find a way to win it. I think coming off the loss, in front of the home crowd, there's a lot of momentum that could be had for the Tar Heels, especially if they could get out to an early start. It's going to be a track meet. You know, I don't think it's going to be a blowout. I'm going to go 87-84 Carolina. We're going to be stressed out. Hair's going to be gray, but Carolina's going to get a win. And I think that, you know what, it's going to live up to the rivalry, because I think that both teams are hungry for this one. And it's the first one. That first one, like you said, always has that hype.
So I got a 4-point deficit, or 4-point margin of victory. You got 3-point margin of victory. How do you get there? Are we winning for you? Are we winning by 3? Either again, a defensive stop, or is somebody hitting a 3 with like 5 seconds left here to seal a victory?
Okay, so knowing how this rivalry is, Carolina's going to be up 85-84 with a couple seconds left, and Duke's going to miss a shot to take the lead, and RJ Davis is going to sink home 2 free throws and win the game. I don't know how yours is going to go, but that's what I'm hoping in my mind. If they're going to stress me out, at least stress me out in a good way.
I'd rather be the other way, where it's tied and somebody hits 3 for us to win the game, because being up 1 and not having the ball does not sit well with me at all. Yeah, I figure we'd be up 2 or 3 and late and get a foul and make 1 of 2 or something like that. I saw this question the other day on Twitter. I like your opinion on this. So if you had to pick, would you rather win out blowout or win at the buzzer?
Against Duke?
Yes.
Or against any? Okay.
No, against Duke. You can win by 30, or RJ can hit a 3 from 30 feet to win the game.
Okay, so of course anybody would pick a blowout in terms of like, yeah, you kicked somebody's butt, especially Duke. But I feel like the games that have that dramatic ending last better, like the Caleb Love shot over Mark Williams. Like that game, like you don't talk about the blowouts. Nobody cares about those. They care about the ones that are close. And an RJ Davis buzzer beater against Duke, I just can't go against that. I would have to say the buzzer beater.
That's where I was at with it. I saw a lot of people was like, well, I couldn't handle the stress of it. I'm like, well, if you're being given the option, you're picking the outcome, so you know the result.
Yeah, you know what the outcome is. Yeah, but if I didn't know the result and I had to say it, I would be like, yeah, I'll take a buzzer beater from. No, I still have nightmares of the who was it, Tyus Jones or whatever Jones brother it was. I still have nightmares of that one with those really ugly looking, those
Austin
really
Rivers.
Austin Rivers. But I was talking about those ugly
Yeah.
jerseys too. Those
Yes.
disgustingly ugly jerseys. And I'm never one to say anything Carolina is ugly, but those were not the best looking jerseys ever.
Yeah, so I'm with you. I would pick the buzzer beater for sure. And you mentioned Caleb Love's shot, dramatic shot, obviously in the Final Four. I saw this on Twitter or on X the other day. Somebody said that ESPN cannot show the Caleb Love shot when he's running a promo for for Duke Carolina because the game was not on ESPN. It was on Turner.
Wow.
And it makes sense. I mean, we haven't seen a promo that includes the Caleb Love shot. I just think that's wild. It's the biggest shot in the history.
I didn't hear that.
The biggest shot. It's the biggest shot in the history of the rivalry, and ESPN doesn't have it in the promo for Saturday night.
It's kind of like, yeah, it didn't happen. It's okay. Caleb Love's in Arizona. He didn't go to Carolina or anything. It's fine, you know.
Hey, and
that's weird. That's
just
crazy.
Remember, every time you see the Jeff Capel shot from half court, Carolina won the game.
That is true. So we're both on the same page that Carolina is going to win this game. Hopefully that remains true. But of course, win, lose, or draw, we are going to be back here next week talking all about it, of course, because why not? That's what we love to do. And you know what? As much as we love to say it, we got to say it one more time. Go Heels.
Go Heels.
That's another episode of the Talkin Heels podcast, powered to you by Keeping It Healed, Delahanty Media. That guy is Jordan Foles. I'm Nick Delahanty. If you're not rooting for Carolina Blue this weekend, quite frankly, you're wrong. Talk to you guys soon and enjoy the game.